The duel for the chieftainship. A legacy of empowerment and leadership. In the village of Cabo, nestled in the heart of Africa, the chieftainship had always been passed down from father to son. Chief Raka only had one child with his beautiful wife Rama. Amara was her name, and she was the envy of the village and her father's pride. Born when Raka was already advanced in age, Amara was his only child and the light of his life. From the time she could walk, he commissioned the best warrior in the kingdom, Zunda, to train Amara in combat and in the ways of Cabo. Despite her fierce training, Amara's beauty shone through. Her long, dark hair fell in soft waves down her back, and her eyes sparkled with kindness and intelligence. All the villagers loved her for her kind heart and generosity. Now, as the chief was at the sunset of his life, he called Amara into his hut where he lay frail. There was a sadness in his eyes that she had never seen before. "Amara, my child," he said, his voice weak. "It is time now for you to take the throne." Amara was taken aback. "Father, I'm not ready," she protested. "I still have so much to learn." "You are ready, Amara," Raka said firmly. "You have been training your entire life for this. And I know that you have the wisdom and the strength to lead our people." "But father," Amara said, her voice trembling, "the villagers will never allow a girl to sit on the throne. They will never accept me as their leader." Raka reached out and took his daughter's hand. "You are their leader, Amara," he said. "And they will accept you because they love you. You have their respect and their admiration. And I have no doubt that you will make an excellent chief." Tears filled Amara's eyes as she looked down at her father's frail form. She knew that he was right. It was time for her to step up and become the leader that Cabo needed. And she would do everything in her power to make her father proud. The next morning, Raka called a meeting with the village council. They gathered in the central square, murmuring among themselves. They hadn't seen the chief for a while, and were shocked at how frail he had become. As Raka stood before the council, it was clear that he was but a shadow of the man he once was. Once a towering figure, he was now hunched over, his once proud stature diminished. But despite his weakened state, his eyes burned with the same fire that had made him a revered leader in the village for so many years. The council members sat on the edge of their seats, waiting for Raka to speak. They knew that something important was about to be said. "My dear council members," he began, his voice raspy but with much authority. "I have called you here today because I have an announcement to make." The council leaned in, eager to hear what their chief had to say, their faces etched with concern. "I have come to the end of my life," Raka continued. "And it is time for me to pass the mantle of leadership to someone else." The council members murmured amongst themselves, wondering who the next chief would be. Raka continued, "My only child, Amara, has proven herself to be a skilled warrior and a compassionate leader. It is my wish that she takes over as the next chief of our beloved village." But before anyone could react, Cabo, the leader of the chief's council, stood up abruptly. His face was contorted with anger as he glared at Raka. "What madness is this?" he bellowed. "You know very well that our traditions state that only a man can be chief. How can you even consider giving the throne to a woman?" The other council members nodded in agreement, afraid to speak out against Cabo. Cabo was a man of average build but with a sharp wit and cunning mind. He was a moneylender, known for his ruthless business practices and had made a fortune off the backs of the villagers. Cabo had the support of many council members as he held their debts over their heads. He often used this to his advantage to push his own interests and agendas forward. Despite not being physically imposing, Cabo's wealth and influence made him the second most powerful man in Cabo, after the chief. Cabo stood there, his eyes locked on Amara. "I challenge you, Amara," he said, his voice booming through the room. "Trial by combat for the chieftainship of Cabo." Amara's heart leaped in excitement, knowing that she had trained her whole life for this moment. She had always been confident in her combat skills, and was eager to prove herself. "You're on, Cabo," she replied, her voice steady and confident. The council members murmured in surprise, as the idea of trial by combat had not been used in Cabo for many years. Raka looked worriedly at Amara, but she gave him a reassuring nod. She knew she could take Cabo down any day. Cabo coughed weakly, beating his chest lightly. "As you all know, I have been under the weather for a while now," he said, pausing to catch his breath. "So, I pledge my son, Cabo, to stand in my place." "Thank you." The room fell silent. and Amara's heart sank. She had been looking forward to facing Cabo in combat, but now she would have to fight his son instead. She glanced at Cabo, who was sitting quietly in the corner, a look of determination on his face. Cabo's fake cough erupted again, causing him to double over and thump his chest with his fist. As the council members exchanged concerned glances, Cabo straightened up, a sly grin spreading across his face. Ahem, he cleared his throat dramatically. Cabo, my son, stand up and let them see you. Cabo stood up, his muscular frame towering over everyone in the room. He was a fearsome warrior, his physique muscular and toned from years of training. He had taken after his mother, who was a big woman and towered over most of the other villagers. If someone told you that Cabo and Cabo were related, you would have to squint to see it. Amara's heart sank slightly at the sight of Cabo. She knew she was up against a formidable opponent. The council members nodded in agreement, their eyes fixed on the two contenders. The atmosphere in the room was tense, charged with the anticipation of the coming battle. Raka's announcement of the next full moon date jolted Amara out of her thoughts. She realized that the duel was only 2 weeks away, and she needed to focus on her training. She took a deep breath and stood up, feeling a bit lightheaded. Her mind went blank, and she could only hear her mother Rama's voice in her head. Remember your training, my daughter, Rama's voice repeated. Focus on your opponent's weaknesses, and never let your guard down. Despite her apprehension, Amara felt a small spark of excitement growing inside of her. She was determined to prove her worth, and become the new chief of Cabo. She knew that this duel would be the ultimate test of her skills, and her will to succeed. Amara approached Zunda, her trusted mentor and trainer, in preparation for the upcoming duel with Cabo. Zunda, I need to be ready for anything Cabo might throw at me. What can I do to improve my chances? Zunda thought for a moment before replying. First, you need to use your agility to your advantage. Small fighters like yourself can be quicker and more agile, making it difficult for your opponent to land a hit. Got it, Amara nodded, making a mental note. Second, you need to keep moving, Zunda continued. Don't let Cabo pin you down or corner you. Use your speed and agility to keep him on his toes. Amara nodded again, understanding the importance of staying mobile during the fight. And third, don't underestimate the element of surprise. Use feints and misdirection to throw Cabo off balance and create openings for yourself. Amara smiled, feeling more confident in her abilities. Thanks, Zunda. Zunda's expression grew more serious. Point 4 is the most crucial of them all. It's about strategy and planning. You can't just rely on your physical abilities alone. You need to analyze Cabo's fighting style, find his weaknesses, and plan your attacks accordingly. Amara nodded, realizing the importance of strategy in addition to physical prowess. I understand, Zunda. I'll start strategizing immediately. Amara trained rigorously for the next 2 weeks, focusing on agility, speed, and precision. She sparred with Zunda, honing her technique and perfecting her moves. Zunda pushed her to her limits, never letting her give up, always reminding her that she was fighting for the future of her people. Cabo, on the other hand, did not bother training. He spent his days dreaming of the power he would have as the chief's son, and the influence he would wield over the people of Cabo. He was convinced that he didn't need to train, that his strength alone would be enough to win the duel. Cabo too was busy strategizing. He spent long hours in his chambers, poring over maps and plans, envisioning the changes he would make as the new chief of Cabo. He was confident that Cabo would emerge victorious in the duel, and he was already planning for the future. As the day of the duel drew closer, the tension in the air was palpable. The people of Cabo were divided, some rooting for Amara, others for Cabo. As Amara approached Raka's hut, she could hear the sound of his voice singing a traditional Quiberan song. She paused for a moment outside, taking in the sound of his voice, before entering the hut. Raka looked up from his work as Amara entered, a smile spreading across his face. My child, you look well, he said, rising from his chair to embrace her. Amara felt a rush of warmth as she hugged her father tightly. I've been training hard, she replied, pulling back to look up at him. Raka nodded approvingly. I have no doubt of that, he said. Your mother would be proud of you, Amara. Amara's heart swelled with emotion at the mention of her mother. I wish she was here to see this, she said softly. Raka placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She is always with us, Amara, he said. and I am proud of you, no matter what happens in the upcoming duel." Amara felt tears welling up in her eyes at her father's words. "Thank you, father," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Raka pulled her into another embrace. "I have always believed in you, my child," he said. "And I know that you will make us all proud." On the day of the duel, the village square was bustling with activity as people gathered to witness the fight. Amara stood in one corner of the square, a confident look on her face, as she held her weapon, a short sword that had been her mother's. She loved this weapon, as it reminded her of her mother's strength and courage. Cabo stood in the opposite corner, looking arrogant and smug, with a large battle axe in his hand. The king gave the signal to start, and the crowd fell silent. Amara and Cabo began to circle each other, eyes locked in a fierce stare. Suddenly, Cabo charged at Amara, swinging his axe with all his might. But Amara was quick on her feet, dodging his attack and striking him with her sword. The crowd erupted into cheers as Amara landed the first blow, and she felt a surge of confidence. But Cabo was not one to give up easily. He swung his axe again and again, each time narrowly missing Amara. She continued to dodge his attacks, waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, Amara saw her opening. Cabo had left himself vulnerable, and she seized the opportunity to strike. She lunged forward, her sword aimed at his chest. But at the last second, Cabo dodged, and Amara's sword grazed his arm. The crowd gasped in shock as Cabo let out a triumphant laugh. Amara's heart sank, realizing that she had underestimated her opponent. As Cabo continued to attack with all his might, Amara focused on dodging each blow, conserving her own energy. She was impressed by his physical fitness, but she knew that his strength and size would eventually wear him down. As Cabo became increasingly frustrated and began shouting at her to fight back, Amara smiled inwardly, knowing that she had gotten into his head. She just needed to keep this up for a bit longer. Meanwhile, Zunda watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride as he saw Amara's strategy in action. However, the crowd was starting to grow bored with the lack of action, and Kubi was becoming annoyed at the delay to his chieftainship. Amara could sense the impatience in the air, but she remained calm and focused on her plan. As the fight went on, Amara could see that Cabo was getting tired. His movements were becoming slower, and he was breathing heavily. She knew that this was her chance to strike. With lightning-fast reflexes, Amara lunged forward and delivered a swift blow to Cabo's stomach. He let out a loud grunt and stumbled backwards, his guard momentarily down. Amara seized the opportunity and charged forward, delivering a powerful blow to Cabo's head. He fell to the ground, dazed and disoriented. The crowd erupted in cheers as Amara emerged victorious. Zunda ran forward and lifted her up on his shoulders, the villagers cheering and chanting her name. Kubi sat in stunned silence, his plans for his chieftainship now shattered. Amara sat on her throne, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She had emerged victorious in the duel against Cabo, and now she ruled her people with a steady hand. Her voice was sturdy and her eyes serious as she listened to her subjects' concerns. But as she looked out at her subjects, Amara couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. Her father, Raka, was no longer there to guide her, to offer his wisdom and support. She wondered if he would have been proud of the ruler she had become, of the decisions she had made, and the path she had taken. She looked out at her people once again, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She was their chiefess, and she would do everything in her power to protect and serve her people. So, what lessons did we learn from this story? Did you see how Amara used strategy and intelligence to overcome her opponent, even when the odds were against her? If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more exciting stories and thought-provoking content. Thank you for watching the Tales of the Savanna, and I'll see you in the next video.